Hey guys, welcome to another brush up on Bob with EMS. Today we're talking about an interesting topic. We're talking about sepsis. Okay, and with sepsis, we're going to specifically talk about the SIRS criteria and the Robson pre-hospital sepsis score. So the SIRS criteria, okay, with the SIRS, number one, we want to be concerned about the different criteria that they're going to present with. So we're going to be looking for a couple different things. Number one, we're going to be looking for a temperature that is 100.4 or greater, or 96.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember, that's also degrees Fahrenheit for 100.4 or less. Okay. Number two, we're going to look for a heart rate that is greater than 90. And that is a tachycardic heart rate for them, but it may not be a tachycardic heart rate by definition. Most people don't tack around 90 unless they have poor health. Number three, we're going to be looking at a white blood cell count of greater than 12,000 or less than 4,000, okay, or they have 10% greater than 10% bands. Now, bands are the immature white blood cells. So when the white blood cells are dividing, they create bands. And I'm going to go ahead and show that to you how that works. Okay, right here on the right side we have the white blood cell, and this right here is the white blood cell, and that is a normal white blood cell. Now, however, when cells divide and create more white blood cells, when they start creating through mitosis and meiosis, they start dividing and separating into other cells, so we start creating cells. And so this cell is going to start dividing, and it's going to start dividing once it gets all the chromosomes and everything like that, and it's going to start dividing. And when it starts dividing, it gets these looking like kind of a band. So if you want to think about a rubber band, okay, being stretched outwards, okay, and then when it closes back down around a kind of that white blood cell, okay, it's going to push inward and kind of pull it in so it looks like this up here, where the white blood cell is kind of dividing. And that's what we call the bands. So when we have bands, so you'll see those numbers on lab values. If you have more than greater than 10% bands, that means we have immature white blood cells. Now, the reason we have immature white blood cells is because those white blood cells are being kicked out to try to combat that infection. And instead of going through all of the basic training like people do when they join the military, they can't do the normal 4-week basic training. They're just kicking them out in 7 days. So they're not completely done yet. And so they're going to battle and they're not completely done. So we get these bands right here that are incomplete, and they're not like our whole white blood cell over here. And so we have what we call bands. Finally, if there's a suspected source of infection plus the criteria that I've already mentioned, that follows with the SIRS criteria. Okay, the Robson criteria, very similar to the SIRS criteria, but if suspected sepsis, if 2 or more of the Robson criteria are present, we've got a sepsis possibly. So we have a temperature of greater than 100.4. This is the same as the SIRS, or okay, greater than, or if there's 96, excuse me, that looks bad there. Let's go ahead and erase that. 96.8 degrees Fahrenheit. or less. Okay, if they have a heart rate that is greater than 90, okay, that's still the same. Now, the Robson uses a respiratory rate, okay, that is greater than 20 per minute. They also use an acutely altered mental status. So if they have an altered mental status, okay, and if they have a blood glucose greater than 120. Now this is greater than 120 if they are a non-diabetic. Okay, if it's greater than 120, that's basically saying that sugar is not being used and it's starting to increase. So we're going to a non-aerobic metabolism to an anaerobic metabolism, not using enough sugar there. And so we're doing that anaerobic metabolism, so we're creating lactic acid at that point. So that's the Robson criteria. Finally, let's talk about end-tidal CO2. So when we see that end-tidal CO2, okay, we're looking for a normal range of 35 to 45 millimeters of mercury, okay? And that's what we're hoping to see for their end-tidal CO2. And that's because our normal blood pH, which is interesting fact, our normal pH is 7.35 to 7.45, okay? And that normal pH, as you see, these match with this right here, okay? And that's our pH there. Now, with our pH levels, they correspond usually with our end-tidal CO2 with our byproduct that we're breathing off. And in shock, which sepsis is a form of shock if it goes on long enough, they can show signs of shock. So there's another criteria that some people are starting to use, and that's the reading the end-tidal and what the end-tidal is going to be. So if the end-tidal in sepsis is less than 25 millimeters of mercury, that is a sign of shock, and it indicates it. It also, they may have a lactate level of 6.1 milliosmoles, okay? And that 6.1, if it's greater than 4 for a lactate, that's usually a sign of shock. So with less than 25, that's a big indicator there, and that's something we can use in the pre-hospital field. Lactate, some people are using, but it's so expensive in the field, not a lot of people are using the lactate monitors. So how do we treat that? We're going to go ahead and talk about that here now. So treating sepsis, we're going to need to do a couple things. Number one, we need to identify that it's sepsis and start treating, okay? And once we start treating, we need to do possibly a fluid challenge for this patient, okay? And you guys remember from paramedic school or AEMT class that a fluid challenge is 20 milligrams per kilogram, okay? And you do that 20 milligrams per kilogram. Now, if that doesn't work the first time, okay, doesn't work the first time, you're going to go on to dopamine. So that's going to be a paramedic drug that we're going to use, okay? And dopamine, you're going to be between 5 and 20 mics per kilogram per minute, okay? And you don't want to exceed 20 micrograms with this drug on your dose that you're thinking there with your kilograms per minute that you're going to be giving this drug to this patient. Other services are doing dobutamine, NOR-epi. Some services are doing epi, but you want to be careful with epi based on how it gets skeletal muscles to activate. And those skeletal muscles, how they're activating, is going to start releasing more of that lactic acid into the body. Remember, if we get energy, and energy creates byproducts of CO2, okay, and lactic acid when we don't have oxygen involved. If we increase that activity, we're going to start increasing the lactic acid that's being given off. All right. So that's kind of sepsis in a nutshell there. And I hope that kind of gives you guys an idea of what you need to be looking for when it comes to sepsis. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to put them in the comments below with the video. Look forward to hearing from you guys. If you guys have any questions ever about sepsis or anything else, just shoot me a message on the Facebook page or on the YouTube page. You guys have a wonderful evening. We'll talk to you later.